So as of the time of making this video, it's been more than 8 months, coming on 9 months now actually, since I left Microsoft to join Netflix. So far, I have loved every single moment of my new job. It's been tough, it's been challenging, I have learned a ton. But as you'd imagine, when I was leaving Microsoft to join Netflix, there was a ton that was going through my mind. I had a ton of conversations with people, friends, mentors, managers from both companies actually, to try to make sure the decision I was making was right. And I know some of you are thinking, of course, it's a no-brainer to leave Microsoft to join Netflix, but there were a lot of factors to consider, and I wanted to make sure I was making the right move, or at least thinking through all the factors before I made a choice. So in this video, I want to talk about the whole process of going from Microsoft to Netflix. I'll talk about how it happened, how I got recruited, and how I actually set myself up to get into Netflix without even realizing I was setting myself up, right? So if you're in a similar situation where you're thinking through making a huge career move like this, hopefully you'll find this video useful. If not, it could be entertainment and motivation for other people who are watching. So yeah, let's get into it, shall we? First off, I know what you're thinking. Uma, where are you? This doesn't even look like your studio setup. Why are you holding a mic? I know all those questions. Ignore all of those for now. I have a ton of podcast equipment that I'm like, you know what? Why not try it out? Also, you're in my living room. Welcome. I am trying out a different format of videos for, conversational videos where we just talk. Yes, without straying too far from the opinion, how did this even happen? So I like to think about it as a mixture of luck and opportunity. In November 2024, I planned on going to Afrotech. Afrotech is a tech conference in Houston, and I planned on going to Houston for Afrotech, but I didn't quite plan on going to Afrotech. If you're locked in, you'll understand what I mean. I was basically going to go to Houston to just, have a good time, meet with some of my friends who were there, and potentially go to the conference, but the conference wasn't my main reason for going there. And while I was at Afrotech, a friend of mine who worked at Netflix, a friend and very good mentor, Chooks, he was like, hey, I will be at Afrotech, and I will be representing Netflix. You should come and talk to us. And at the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to pay the ticket to go in and, talk to one company. I wasn't looking to leave at the time, but he was like, hey, it doesn't hurt to come and talk to us. So I did. I got the ticket, I went, and I didn't even speak to him, right? He was there, but he didn't have me talk to him. He had me talk to, a separate engineer on the team. And I had a very good conversation with one person there. And a couple of days later, I got an email saying, hey, I think you'll be a great fit for this role. You should go apply. So I did, and the rest is history. But it's not as simple as that, right? There's a whole backstory that set me up to be even in this position. When I first joined Microsoft, I started as a software engineer in a purely networking org. My role was basically to do networking automation. So I would take processes that would take around 4 days, 5 days, right? The SLA, service level agreement, is this thing that you want, we'll get it done in 4 days. I would write code that would take that to around 15 minutes. I did that for around, 2.5 years, and I really enjoyed it, right? At the time, I was writing code that was solving problems and it was creating value. And so it was pretty easy to get promoted there, but it wasn't fully a software engineering org, right? It was like software was something they were using to get better at networking. So there wasn't as much emphasis on the best software practices. I was one of the very few software engineers in my team, actually. And so there were other software engineers in different teams, but they were at similar levels like I was. So there wasn't a lot of learning. There wasn't a lot of growth, right? It's like as long as what you're building was doing what it was supposed to, there wasn't opportunity to say, okay, how can we make it bigger, right? There wasn't that full mentorship to go to someone who has been doing it for years to get feedback from them. And so very early on, I think after a year and a half, I started realizing that's definitely not the place for me to be in the long haul, because if I got promoted there once, I've made substantial impact to do some stuff there. The next time I get promoted there, then I'm now kind of like niching in, and you're now at a level where you're higher than the base, but what you know in terms of software engineering at that level is not as good compared to other people. So my scope was very niched, right? It was just automation. That was the only thing I was doing. And so very early on, I realized, after a while, I'm going to leave here. So 2 years in, I found myself reshuffled into a different team that was doing a similar version of networking automation, but this time it was at larger scale. So we would basically automate the OS upgrades of networking devices all around the world. That was a lot more challenging. That was fun, but it was still software within a networking org. And at the time, I basically just realized my next promotion in this place was going to be to a senior software engineer. And the question I asked myself is this what I want to specialize in? And to be quite frank, the answer was no. I do not want to specialize in networking. So at some point in time, I decided to leave the whole networking org. Let me tell you, leaving the networking org was one of the hardest things that I have done in my whole entire career, because from a certain perspective, it's like living in a place that's stable, right? Yes, the work wasn't the most enjoyable, but I was looking for more challenging work. That's the first part. Secondly, when you're now interviewing for teams and you're asking you about the work that you've done, that's when you realize, man, the work I am doing is not complex at all. It's very simple compared to what some of the other teams were doing. I was talking to teams that were doing IC3, media transport layer. We're talking the low-level code that takes the bytes and bits from your Teams call for audio and video, transcode it, and send it over the internet. They were creating a new protocol for that. I was trying to get to that type of thing because the work there was a lot more challenging. But when you go to them and you tell them, hey, this is the work I'm doing, they can't relate. They're like, well, you're just writing simple automation scripts that does X, Y, and Z, but we're looking for people that have solved way more complicated problems than what you're doing. So I got a lot of rejections, even within Microsoft. I got a ton of rejections where some teams would just flat out not interview me. Some other teams would interview me, but it would be on some low-level stuff that I have no experience doing. And eventually, I landed a role in Substrate. I didn't give up. It was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've done. The roughest 6 months of my life. I was hustling, I was grinding, but eventually, I landed in Substrate. Substrate is the largest data organization in the world. What does that mean? If you've interacted with any Microsoft Office 365 product, your data lives in Substrate. We're talking Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, basically any Office 365 product. So as you'd imagine, the complexity there was absolutely absurd, right? It's wild. It was pure distributed systems, right? There were so many services that were running within Substrate itself that had to be deployed to multiple regions all around the world. We're talking high RPS distributed systems, right? Millions of requests per second. It was a whole completely different ballgame, but it was the type of work that I was looking for. How did I get it? The team that I joined, we're looking for people who are looking for challenging work. They just needed someone who were like, yeah, I'm down. And so when I joined, it was difficult. Extremely, extremely difficult. I had to ramp up on so many things. I had to learn the code base. First of all, there was a lot of business context, a lot of business logic written in code that I'm like, I have no idea what this thing even means. It was code that was written all the way back in like 2002, right? Like just some very, very old stuff. While I was there, I was in FileScore. I basically wrote and maintained APIs for ingesting files into Substrate. So we're talking OneDrive files, right? SharePoint files, basically anything files related to Substrate. I wrote code that did that. It was very tough, but I knew that was where I needed to be because of one, the scale of the work, two, the impact of the work, right? It was a completely different org, completely different group, very, very interesting, challenging stuff. That was the type of stuff that I wanted to be doing, right? And so I was in a place where I was happy. I promise all of this is going to lead back to me joining Netflix very soon. I promise. Just stick with me. So 7 months into Substrate, this was when I decided to go to the Afrotech conference. Like I said, I was just going to go to Houston to have a good time. If you haven't, I highly recommend. I didn't go this year, but I highly recommend. You have to go to Houston at least once. Don't live there. Don't live there. If you live there, your life will be in shambles. But you have to go to Houston. I highly recommend. So I was going to go to Houston for the weekend to have fun. A lot of Nigerian food. You know, just do that. And Chooks was like I said, Chooks said, hey, Uma, come and talk to us at Netflix. I said, senior man, I'm not really looking. Chooks said, it doesn't hurt to come talk to us. So I went and I bought the ticket just to go and talk to one company. I walked around a bit. People recognized me. I said hi, but eventually I ended up at the Netflix booth, spoke to one person who was there, and we were just having a conversation like software engineer. I didn't even take my resume there, right? I didn't take my resume. I just wanted to just go say hi to Chooks. There was a line in front of him. He said, oh, you should talk to this person instead. Spoke to them. And I just started going ham on all the work I was doing on Substrate. We're talking, at the time, I was migrating a current service to a new service. And so I was telling the software engineer about how I was doing shadow deployments. Shadow deployments is essentially where you take the same service and you replicate it, and you take some of the traffic from one and you route it to another, right? You basically duplicate that traffic and you see the output of that traffic, right? That was the type of stuff that I was doing. Spoke to him about how I set that up, you know, how I was working with the different teams from different places and all that stuff. And guess what? They were basically doing the same thing, right? And so it was like, oh man, we have a whole team at Netflix called Chaos Experimentation, and they build stuff like that. And this is how we use it, and this is how they do stuff. And I'm like, oh, super, super interesting, right? tell me about how you guys are solving this problem. And then they then said it, and I was like, oh, interesting. We just essentially had a back and forth that felt like two coworkers were just having a conversation, right? Mind you, I didn't have my resume. I wasn't even trying to get anything. We were just chatting. And a week later, I got a message saying, hey, go find some L4 distributed system roles, right? And apply. I said, hey, I'm not looking to leave. I'm in Substrate, right? There's still a lot in Substrate that I want to accomplish. I'll get into that a bit, but I do not want to leave yet. He said it doesn't hurt to apply. I went and I applied. A week later, a recruiter reached out to me. I spoke to the recruiter. She was like, did you talk to our people at Netflix? I was like, why? Why, yes, I did. And she was like, oh, how did that conversation go? I was like, it went well. I spoke to them about this, the stuff that you're doing. They're very, very interesting, very similar to what I'm doing. She was like, all right, great. They spoke very highly of you. And I was like, thank you. Of course they did. I'm me. This is the point where I would drop the mic, but it's a really expensive mic. But she was like, all right, I would like to put you through an interviewing screen. Are you interested? Of course I do. I coach people for technical interviewing. Shameless plug, by the way. Why don't I jump in, right? Why don't I do the interview? Any chance I have to interview, I'm going to interview. Whether I'm joining your company or not, I just want to stay fresh. I want to, test my skills. So I said, why not? I will do your technical interviewing coaching. So I did. And the deeper I got into the technical interviewing, systems design, problem solving, all that stuff, the better and better they were. And yeah, at some point in time, towards the end of it, I just found myself with an offer. There was a great team that was doing something very similar, distributed systems at a very high level, thousands of RPS per second too. And I was like, yeah, this sounds like a great team, right? Why don't I join this team? And yeah, the rest is history. So that's how I got into Netflix. That's the long story. I want to basically just touch on key takeaways before I jump into some thought processes that I had. First is positioning. If I had never left the automation work that I was doing to join Substrate, where I was doing more distributed system stuff at scale, I would have never been exposed to that to even have a conversation at that level that I was doing with Netflix. This is important. Whatever work we're doing is scoped to a certain aspect in software engineering, right? There's automation, there's front-end stuff, there's back-end stuff, there's all this stuff, right? But it's heavily scoped. If that is where you want to specialize in, then by all means, you stay there. But if that's not where you want to specialize in, which I highly recommend testing out different places to figure out what you want to do before fully specializing. But if I didn't leave, right? If I didn't go through that hard rut of 6 months of interviewing where people were telling me, yeah, the work you're doing is not complex enough, I would have never gotten the skills. I would have never been exposed. I would have never positioned myself to have conversations like that and to even understand those concepts, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is opportunity, right? I had applied to Netflix hundreds of times. That 6 months when I was trying to leave the automation work I was doing, I applied to Netflix. I send application over and 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 over again, but I never heard back. The one time that I did go to Afrotech and I had a conversation with one person without the intent of even needing a job, that's how I got recognized. That's how I got in. The third is timing. When it came to the interview itself, I think because I wasn't looking, because there wasn't any additional pressure, I didn't feel the need to over-prepare, if that makes sense. So I basically just said, yeah, if this thing goes fine, great. If it doesn't go fine, absolutely, why not, right? I'm in a place where I'm being challenged. I am completely learning, and there was no pressure, right? From when I did the first interview till the end, I think I interviewed over Christmas, actually, which was wild, right? I think I did an interview like December 22nd. They were like, do you want to do it? I'm like, if there's people to interview me December 22nd, why not, right? Like, I had nothing to lose. So it was a lot simpler for me to just go in with that mentality. And I think that pays off in ways that a lot of people don't think about, right? I want to quickly talk about the process of going to your manager and say, hey, this is my 2 weeks notice. I'm leaving. Especially coming from someone whose first job was at Microsoft. I got my immigration status, my green card through Microsoft. Microsoft was the only company that I had known. It was like kind of like my first love, right? So I don't know, I feel weird for saying that. But it was kind of like my first company. So it was hard to physically leave, especially for a place like Netflix where it's still relatively new. You hear all the stuff about the culture and you're like, man, is this a hard place to work at? But yeah, it was hard. I definitely had conversations with people before I left, and the overwhelming feedback there was now is the time to do it. If you're going to do it, now is the time to do it. I don't know what stage you are in your career, but it's a lot easier to make these moves now when you're very early on, where you can pivot. You essentially don't have anything holding you down. From a career perspective also, I had only worked at Microsoft. Microsoft was the only place that I knew. And then now joining Netflix, there is so much that I would have never learned at Microsoft. I did give up some stuff. My next promotion at Microsoft was going to become a senior software engineer, and it was going to happen relatively soon, maybe in like a year. There's no way I can sustainably get to senior in a year at Netflix. There's a lot that needs to happen. I have to now go into Netflix and prove myself, right? To say, okay, I am this guy. I'm the guy you're paying all this money for. Speaking of the money, listen, between me and you, don't tell anybody else. Between me and you understand? And let's just leave it at that. They said what is understood doesn't need to be said. I know that's what a lot of people index on there. Like, of course, you would leave Microsoft to join Netflix. The money is probably great. It is. I'm not going to lie. It is. However, there are other factors to consider. And yeah, those were the factors that I basically thought about. And if you're in a similar position, think it through, talk to people. It's also something that you can bring to the Coderoom, which is my private community for software engineers. It is a great segue, isn't it? The Coderoom is essentially a private community for software engineers that I'm building. The idea behind it is simple. I want to create a space for software engineers to grow and learn. The Coderoom has 3 basic pillars. First is upskilling. I will basically help create curated list of projects that you can work on that have certain outcomes that you can finish in a sustainable way. Right now, whatever projects you're working on, you start, you don't finish because there's so many parts that you're not doing. We'll work on that. Second is technical interviews. I interview year-round. Whether I am preparing to leave or not, I still interview. There's certain things that will be in the Coderoom, mock interviews, how to think through interviews, and essentially a guided practice plan to keep you up to shape so that when it's time and when the opportunities do present themselves, you are ready to take them on. Final is career development. If you have a situation like this where you're like, hey, I want to move my team, but I don't know how to do it, come to the Coderoom, post it. There's software engineers like myself and other software engineers who are there to help and will essentially guide you through picking projects that will help you grow, thinking through growth as a software engineer. It's essentially a room for software engineers who want to grow. The wait list is currently up to around, I think, 300 people the last time I checked. Click the link in the bio to join, and I will send you an email once it's open. Now, that said, looking back, I am really glad that I joined Substrate, and I am glad that I left Microsoft at the time that I did. But like I said, at the time, it was very challenging. Now, looking back, it's a great idea. But that's essentially all I have to say in this video. Let me know if you like the video. It's a different style, a different format, kind of me rambling. I have some notes, but right now the recording is 30 minutes. Brian is going to have a lot of chopping to do, but that is essentially the whole story. That is it for this one. Like I said, click the link below to put in your email and I will send you more information once the Coderoom opens. But until then, I will see you and catch you on the next one. Peace. Fun fact, I am actually a stand-up comedian, This is what they do with the mic on stage. So they find me for court all along. Now me they dance on their grave. We no call industry machine. It don't go all along. Challenge me and see. I beg pass me my car. I just want to have fun. I know they worry too much. Nah, I did sing though. But yeah, that's it. Honestly, this video actually was really, really simple. It's way simpler than I thought. But yeah. Catch you on the next one. Goodbye.